Our third speaker is Aleksandra Zurek-Huszcz, who is a graduate of the University of Warsaw and currently working in the Faculty of Polish Studies there and writing a PhD thesis about first names and last names taken by converts from Judaism and Christianity in Warsaw, 1826 to 1850. Aleksandra,
yes,
please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. In my paper, I will present the names of the converts from Judaism to Christianity in Warsaw in the years 1826 to 1850. And the most important aim of my research is to answer the question about reasons for choosing particular names. I will discuss types of names born by the converts prior to the baptism and after it, and show possible correlations between the new names and the former names. During the period of 1826 to 1850, in Warsaw, there were parishes of 3 denominations: Catholic, 7 parishes, 6 Roman Catholic and 1 Greek Catholic; Protestant, 2 parishes, 1 Lutheran and 1 Calvinist, and 1 Orthodox parish. In my research, I also included 7 Catholic parishes located in the neighboring villages that are now within the city borders. The conversion documents were recorded in parish registers, so they were not distinguished in any way from records of the children of Christian parents. So in order to find the documents proving the conversion, it was necessary to examine all records of baptism. In all the parishes in Warsaw in 1826 to 1850, there were over 115,000 baptism records. Among them were 876 converts from Judaism, 701 in Roman Catholic parishes, 133 in Protestant parishes, and 42 in an Orthodox parish. There were no conversions in a Greek Orthodox parish. This community was very small. Over 25 years, there were only 131 baptized children. The first name of the converts, both prior to the baptism and after it, can be divided into 3 main categories. There would be names used only by Jews. Then in the second category, there would be names used only by Christians. And in the third category, names used in both religions. In order to distinguish between the names, I have used several sources. For Jewish names, I made use of 3 modern dictionaries, and I also used 2 publications containing lists of names written by Jewish community authorities in the 19th century and in the beginning of the 20th century. And the latter was much more comprehensive and for this reason much more useful in my research. For Christian sources, I used 2 modern dictionaries. And as a reference for an actual use of particular names in 19th century Warsaw, I have studied the baptism records from the analyzed period. They have been indexed by the members of Polish Genealogical Association, who kindly shared with me the relevant lists. And it was clear that such names as Isaac, Chaim, Hersh, and Yankiel, as well as Chaya, Gouda, Liba, and Rivka, should belong to the category of names used by the Jews exclusively. On the other hand, names such as Antoni, Franciszek, Tomasz, Stanisław, as well as Anastasia, Aniela, Marianna, and Katarzyna were clearly used only by Christians. Names such as Daniel and Shimon were given to the children in both religions, and their occurrences were noted in both Christian and Jewish sources. The differentiation between the names used by Jews and by Christians, however, was not always easy, but this is true only for the names prior to the baptism. The corpus of names of the Jews prior to the baptism was very diverse. Baptism records indicates names of 840 converts, 282 women, and 558 men. The women whose names were noted in baptism records, they used 74 different names. On average, there was 1 name for 3.8 women. We get this number only if we treat diminutive forms and phonetic variants as 1 name. The men whose name prior to the baptism are known had 111 different names, on average 1 name for 5. men. The names used prior to the baptism fall into a few categories. There were Jewish biblical names recorded in their Hebrew variant. There were their vernacular forms. There were diminutive forms. There were names that had been borrowed from Christians and later abandoned by them. There were biblical names given in a Christian form, never used among the Jews themselves. And these names should be considered substitutes for corresponding Jewish names. A person called Solomon in the registry probably used the form Shlomo in everyday life. In the analyzed period, the variant Solomon was sometimes given to the Christian children in Catholic churches, but it was not a common name among Christians. There were also some Christian variants of the biblical names referring only to the biblical figures and not used by Christians in everyday life. The examples are Mojżesz, a Polish variant of a Hebrew biblical name Moshe, and Rebecca, Christian variant of a Hebrew biblical name Rivka. These variants seem to be substitutes of biblical Jewish names, but since they were not chosen by Christian parents as the names for their children, they are not the same Christian names as the names actually given to Christian children. For example, the name Mojżesz for Christians does not belong to the same category as the names Jan or Franciszek. The name Franciszek, by the way, among other typical names of the Catholic saints, was recorded in the registers as a name of the Jews prior to the baptism. As was the case for Polish variants of biblical names, these forms are possibly substitutes for similar Jewish names. It is also possible that in at least some cases the scribes made a mistake of writing down the names taken upon the baptism also as a name of a Jew before changing their religion. I will scream. I can do that. Okay, so I will scream. Okay, so once again, it's also possible that in at least some cases the scribes made the mistakes of writing down the names taken upon the baptism also as a name of a Jew before changing the religion. For example, in St. John the Baptist parish, there is a document which states there was a baptism of Stanisław, to whom on the baptism was given the name Stanisław. In fact, the name of the convert prior to the baptism was probably different than Stanisław. Table 1 presents 10 most common names of converts prior to the baptism, separately for women and for men. The diminutive and phonetic variants of the name are counted as one name. Among the 10 most common female names, there were 7 biblical names and their variants. Chaya, Sara, Estera, Laja, Rivka, Ruchla, and Bora, as well as Yiddish names created from Judeo-Germanic roots, Roiza, Witla, and Fajga. The ratio was similar for 10 most common male names. There were 7 biblical names and their variants, Jacob, Abraham, Joseph, Isaac, Shlomo, Moshe, and Shmuel, as well as 3 Yiddish names of Judeo-Germanic roots, Leibe, Hersh, and Berek, which were kinoim for biblical names Yehuda, Naphtali, and Issachar, respectively. Names of the converts after baptism were much less diverse. In the registers, there are names of 297 women and 578 men, the total of 875 persons. Women had 73 different names, and men 85 different names. Due to the fact that the corpus of Polish Christian names at that time has been homogeneous and stabilized, there were no variants of these names. They were always given in their formal variant, not in a diminutive form. Among them were biblical names and the names of the saints. Table 2 presents 10 most common names after baptism for men and for women. Among 10 most common female names after baptism, there were 5 biblical names, or created on the basis of them, so female variants of male names. And they were Anna, Marianna, Maria, Józefa, Salomea, and 5 names of the saints: Rosalia, Emilia, Tekla, Feliciana, Franciszka. The ratio was similar among the 10 most common male names after baptism. There were 4 biblical names: Jan, Józef, Jakub, Michał, and 6 names of the saints: Alexander, Antoni, Ludwik, Franciszek, Stanisław, and Karol. Due to the fact that some names prior to the baptism and after it were not recorded, it was possible to determine the kind of the name change, a pattern of any sort, for 834 converts. 134, that's 16% of them, kept their previous names. Among them were 33 cases where there was a new name added to the previous one as a second name. Some of these names were the names that could be used both by Jews and Christians, such as Daniel and Szymon. Many more were Polish variants of biblical names, for example, Anna and Józef, which in fact, due to the confusion of the variants done by the scribes, might have been changes of Jewish variant of the same of the name to the Christian variants of the same name. Among the names which were not changed, there were also many names of the saints, such as Henryk, Stanisław, or Wojciech, and these names regarding the converts before the baptism were probably substitutions of similar sounding Jewish names. So what seems to be an unchanged name might have been in fact the result of an adoption of a completely different name which only sounded somewhat similar to the previous one. The correlation between the old names and the new ones is also seen in 20 cases where the previous name became a second name. There were only 31 cases of changing the Jewish variant of the name to the Christian one. For example, Hanna to Anna, Joseph to Józef, Matys to Mateusz, and Michał to Michał. There were also some changes, there were around 50 of them, where some phonetic similarities of the two names can be seen. For example, Icek was often changed to Ignacy, Ruchla to Rosalia, Zysla to Zofia, and Gitla to Tekla. So the traces of the old names are visible in the total of 235 new names, that's 28%. The other changes do not seem to show any correlations between the two names. Most of the Jews chose names that were popular also among the Christians in Warsaw of that period. For the sake of another paper, I have analyzed the names given by the Christian parents to their children, baptized in St. John the Baptist parish in years 1837 to 1867. This is only one parish among many, but it was the second biggest parish in Warsaw after St. Cross parish, and it seems to be quite representative, at least for Catholic parishes which dominated in Warsaw of that time. So this table shows the 10 most common names given to the Christian children, as well as the 10 most common names of the converts after the baptism. 5 of the 10 most common names among female Jewish converts and daughters of the Christian parents coincide. This is Marianna, Józefa, Maria, Anna, and Franciszka. The comparison of masculine names shows even more similarities. 8 of the 10 most common names among male Jewish converts and sons of the Christian parents are the same. It is Jan, Józef, Stanisław, Alexander, Franciszek, Antoni, Ludwik, and Karol. Also, the other names chosen by Jews were popular among Christians. There were some names, however, that were not used by Christians or used rarely, and hence differentiated the baptized Jews from their new community. The examples are Moritz, Łazarz, Rebecca, and Honorata. Such names, however, were not commonly used by the converts, and for this reason it was impossible to indicate names taken by Jews in commemoration of their godparents, because the godparents also had these popular names, nor the saints whose memorial was celebrated on the day of the baptism, because there were many saints of one name. The corpus of names born by Jews, both men and women, prior to the baptism was much more diverse than the corpus of names taken at the baptism. Only 16% of the converts did not change their names. The traces of the old names, such as changing the Jewish variant of the name to the Christian one, or taking the name which sounded somewhat similar to the previous one, can also be seen in additional cases of 101 names, that's 12%. Most of the converts has changed their names completely. They choose typical Christian names born also by Christians, which did not differentiate them as converts. Exceptions are rare. Thank you.